Talofa lava, and welcome everyone to our Pasifika webinar series. The Pasifika webinar series is a continuation of the Pasifika Scholars Summer Institute that bridges culture, community, and education through Talanoa and intends to amplify our Pasifika community's voices, as well as provide resources for higher education at the University of Utah. This Zoom webinar will be moderated, recorded, and offered later on our YouTube channel, the Pasifika Archive. Special thanks to Dr. Keheulani Van, our faculty advisor, Moana Uluave Hafoka, our Bridge Program Director, Kaimana Kahale, and Kalei Tuitupo for bringing this webinar into all of our living rooms.
Sorry. Welcome everybody to our Pasifika webinar series, first of 2021. We're excited to have everyone here and excited to introduce our panel of medical students here at the University of Utah. If you're just joining in for the first time or from last semester, welcome. We're excited to have you here and excited to see all the new lineup for this coming semester and year. So I just wanted to give a little bit about housekeeping items. We're going to have a Q&A portion of the webinar series at the end. So if you're able to join us, please start dropping your questions and write them in the question box, and then we'll go through them at the end of the panel session. And this is a 1.5 hour format. So the first half will be talking to the panelists and then answering those questions. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests. The first here I'd like to introduce is Luti Nonu. Luti was born in 1995 to Siale Nonu and Latai Wolfgram in Kahuku, Hawaii. While he was young, he grew up there and later moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, where he has lived the majority of his life. He graduated from Highland High School in 2013 and then went on an LDS mission to Mexico. He recently graduated from Brigham Young University with a bachelor's in science degree majoring in biology. During that time, he married Keakalani Nonu, and they currently have one daughter. Following his graduation from BYU in April 2020, Luti began medical school here at the University of Utah this past August. Our next panelist is Talisha Tausinga. Talisha grew up in St. George, Utah as the oldest of 5. After graduating high school, she became the first in her family to attend college. While at Brigham Young University, she majored in anthropology and exercise science and played rugby. It was also during this time that she married into the wonderful Tausinga family. And during her junior year, she decided to pursue medicine and began working as a medical assistant for the Intermountain Healthcare to gain experience. After college, she continued this job for 2 years and then started studying here at the medical school. And our final panelist is Siale Teaupa. Siale is from Salem, Utah, graduated from BYU in 2018, in which she took a gap year before applying to medical school. She's currently a second-year med student. As a Tongan and Latina woman, she is extremely passionate about breaking barriers in academia and healthcare for people from underrepresented groups. So I'd like to welcome our guests, and we're so excited that they're here and wanting to join in with us. And we'll get to our questions and getting to know you a little bit. So a little bit from our side and requesting all 3 of you to come and speak as panelists is because our own students have asked several times about the process of medical school and going there. And as a staff person who has not gone to medical school, I wasn't really able to answer a lot of their questions. So out of that need, we are so grateful that all three of you were able to come. I know there's 4 of you there at the medical school, and we just found out as well. And we're excited that they're in our minds. I know you guys have like large classes and feel like the only one sometimes. There's a lot of you there, and hopefully this panel can expose more students to Pacific Islanders that have been able to go through the process and see what it takes to get there. So the first question I just wanted to ask all of you, thinking about being first generation college students and just the effort and time it takes to get to where you all are. I think the most important question, before that, the most important question that I have to ask you is, who is your favorite PI band and why? And then we'll go into the meat of our, we'll break the ice with that. So go ahead, Luti.
I think it just, super classic. I think a lot of Polynesians know him. Fiji is one of my favorite artists, but just an OG, I think.
Good choice. All right, Siale.
I like Kolohekai. When I listen to them, I feel like I'm in Hawaii and not in the snow. So always a good one.
And Talisha?
I mean, those are both good. I like Common Kings. That's where my husband and that was our first date, was a Common Kings concert. So I think that's always what I am reminded of when I listen to them.
Awesome. Those are every time we do this with older panelists or speakers, it usually dates them. So you all are very up to date and contemporary singers. They're like these old school like Togengawa bands. So the next question, just how I was talking, I wanted all 3 of you to just talk about your experiences, kind of your educational journey to get here into medical school. One of the things that like being a first generation is often described as being lonely because you're the first one to do many of the things that you all are doing. So how has your educational journey been, and how did you end up where you are? I gave a short bio, but we'd like the juicy parts. So we'll just start off with Talisha, and then we'll go around.
Man, I thought I was off. I thought Luthi was gonna go first every time, but so I guess like for me, I am first generation. I'm not Polynesian. I grew up around Polynesians, married into the Polynesian culture. So I just wanted to clarify that. But I am first generation. So although I don't know what it's like to be a minority in this process, like being first generation, definitely, I guess loneliness really sums it up very well. It's you don't know where to go to and you don't know what resources are available. My freshman year, I actually lost a scholarship that ended up being like $12,000 because I didn't realize that I had to reapply for it every year. So I feel like that was like, I think the first time in college when I was just like, wow, do I even know what I'm doing? That's so much money that I just lost. And so I guess like if I could boil it down, it's just like not knowing the resources. And like there's so many things I learned my senior year of college that I was like, wow, if I only knew that my freshman year, it would have been so much easier. So that at least is like the biggest thing for me. And I would say that moving forward into like medical school applications as well, like there's so many resources, but I just had no idea. So I kind of just went with it and it worked out. But that's why I think it's so important to educate others on the resources, because if you don't have your parents and a huge community around you that have all gained a university education, you just don't know. You're going in blind.
You can just popcorn out, Siale and Luti.
I guess like I feel really privileged because my mother did graduate from college and my mother is a nurse, and then But my dad is like from Tonga and never went to college. So it was like really interesting growing up with like such a different, I don't know, like experience. Like my dad couldn't relate to a lot of it. And my mom would like get it. Like my dad, like if I would go home and visit my family, like, so I went to BYU too. And I'm from like just 20 minutes away from BYU. So when I would go home, my dad would be like, you need to do this, like clean the house, blah, 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 do this, do that. And my mom would be like, no, she needs to study. And so that was like something that like throughout this entire process, like my dad has like, and just family members, like they've had to like, it's sometimes it's hard for family to understand, like, I can't make it to this event or I can't do this because like I have to do school stuff. And so that's something like I still struggle with, like in my academic journey. Like I miss family stuff all the time because of exams or just like preparing for things. And I think that's like one thing that's like unique to our culture is like we're just so close with our families, and like every event, every wedding, like every baptism, everything is like so important to us. And so that was like a big sacrifice, or just like telling your family like I can't help with this sometimes can be really hard because like I have to study. And so but I feel really like lucky and blessed because like I was on the track and field team throughout my career at BYU, and I had a lot of resources shown to me, and I had a lot of school paid for through academic and sports scholarships. So I feel really blessed, but I didn't know, like same thing as Talisha, like I just didn't know about like a lot of the things, like even stuff that was made for like Pacific Islanders. Like I had no idea that BYU had like this SOAR program and that they had like scholarships. Like I was far beyond that. And so that's something like I have younger siblings and I always have to be like, you need to apply for this scholarship, you need to do that. Because I just wish I would have had someone who could have like showed me that. Like even though I had my mom and like she went to school, like she just wasn't aware of like a lot of these things. And I think that's like the problem for a lot of us is we create these barriers because we don't even know about the things that are out there, or it's just like hard because we don't have the same like family support, just because our families sometimes don't understand what it takes like to be able to go to college or to grad school or any of those. It's just an adjustment for all of our families. But I feel really privileged in that like I do have a parent who went to college who could like help me navigate that. And I think that's made like the world of a difference for me personally. And so like I hope that we can like all of us Polynesians, that when we go to school we can turn around and like help the other ones behind us, because it's such like a scary journey as you're trying to figure it out alone.
Thank you. Luti?
I think I can definitely relate to how Siale and Talisha had experience, navigating their way to get into medical school and just like trying to get through undergrad. Undergrad was a very busy life, I guess I would say. Like Siale said, I didn't know about all these scholarship opportunities. I had to work my way through school, paying semester by semester. And, while going through school, I was working maybe 20, 30 hours a week. And that on top of trying to do BYU rugby. And I also joined a group down at BYU, a Polynesian dance group called Living Legends. And it just got busy. It was a really busy time. I think that the work aspect of it was something that really complicated my life, because even though I would want to rest, or I'd want to just get a few more hours of study, and I'd have to go to work because I knew that I would need that money either to put, to have some food on the table, or not be so fuckahela to my parents and asking for this or that. So that was like a big part, I think, that I remember through undergrad, just always having to work. I always kind of got jealous of a bunch of my classmates, a lot of my following classmates and stuff. Like they had their parents just pay for everything that they had, and like good for them. I'm not downing on the fact that they're blessed, but it's a really different experience than when you have to work, and when you have to, like Siale said, you have to go out and you have to search for how you're going to do this, or how you're going to get to the medical field. How are you going to be able to do all these things, make the money work, make the financials work, and include that along with what Siale said with our family life and the schooling, because the undergrad, you know, the prereqs to get into med school, they're not easy classes by any means, and, you know, including the Mcat. It's a pretty hard study course. But at the same time, I did want to mention just how grateful I was for my Polynesian community throughout all of this. Even though it was hard to find good mentors. It was hard to find people that could, you know, really just guide me. Being on the rugby team and surrounded by a bunch of cool polys from all over the world, New Zealand and Hawaii, some from Fiji. It was an awesome experience to just have those brothers alongside of me. I also made like my first friends down at BYU were those in the Living Legends group. And I think, you know, just staying anchored and having that Polynesian community around me, you know, even though a lot of them weren't going into medicine, it was just really nice to be able to leave class and I know where the polys will be. You know, I go to the lunch tables, I know exactly there's only one brown table and I know exactly who's at that table. So like it was just really nice, you know, to know where you can find your community. Going to BYU, it's tough in that sense because there's 30-something thousand kids and only you know, not too many polys whatsoever. We barely make up a fraction of the students there, but it was super nice to just always know that if I ever needed a good laugh, if I ever needed a good way to just relax or de-stress from all the studies, from working, I could always go to that table. I could always find my boys and they'd be down to go out and eat or whatever. And so I'm just super glad for my Polynesian community. I'm grateful, you know, in that sense for family as well, from people outside of school. And I had an awesome family who supported me, even though they don't know exactly how to get me through school or what I needed to do. At least it was always good to have that. And I think that is something special that, you know, I don't think every student at BYU had that. I don't think they had a good family background and a good support circle that they could turn to. And so that's just a little bit of my educational background.
Awesome. So a little bit about what all of you talked about. One of the questions I had is, when I was first going into graduate school or school to trying to explain to folks that like, even when you're done with school, like you're not a millionaire. Also, you're not a lawyer or a doctor if you didn't go to medical school or law school. So how do you all explain that you're gonna be at school for 10 years, a lot to your families who are kind of in a lot of situations, first generation, or even just in our Pacific Islander families, how do you explain to your family members and friends that you're going to be in school for 10 years, probably accumulate a lot of debt, and like once you're out, that doesn't, like you're not like a millionaire and then can start doing all the kavenga and for your family, right? I'm just wondering how you all are navigating those conversations right now. Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, those conversations are like really hard, and I don't want to put my husband on the spot or anything, but we've definitely like we've had to have talks about like we don't have money to like help pay for the wedding, you know, like we don't have that type of money, and sometimes that can be like really hard for us to explain to our families, like we would love to help and we will help you through our service and through our love and our support, but right now financially we are like so much negative debt, like that's not like an option right now, and it's like it's just really hard. And the problem is too, like we always have is, you know, like me and my husband say, oh, I'm going to medical school, and a lot of people are like, oh, like you're going to be a nurse, or oh, you're like, they don't really understand what medical school means, and they don't understand like that means like going to school to be a doctor, and like they don't understand that costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I feel like me and my husband, we always have to explain this to like all of our family, like, oh, like I'm in medical school, and that means like I don't get paid, I pay a lot of money, for 4 years, and then I like work for a very like low wage too, like at least 3 years after that. And I don't have like a good answer. But that's something that like I experience all the time. Or they think like when I say, oh, I like helped at the clinic, like they think I'm getting paid for it. I'm like, no, it's free. I'm paying to help. So I don't have a good answer for that, but like that's something I struggle with too.
I was just curious, but I was just thinking about this. Like, I think, you know, something as Polynesians we love is just, we love good stories. And I think that's been a way that I've kind of tried to, you know, communicate, get my message across in a way that I think our people really love. Luckily for us, you know, I think Polynesians in general, you know, there's just a really big heart. There's a lot of love, and there's a lot of love to go around. A lot of people in the community, and I think that kind of leads our people to kind of know other important people. You know, maybe there's no doctors in our family. However, just because of the way my parents were, and like the way that how serviceful they were, and also just all my aunties and uncles, I feel like there was always, you know, some kind of Balangi doctor that we somehow knew. Maybe he was like our little league coach or whatever. So a way that I think I've always tried to talk to people when they struggle to understand why I would do this to myself, is I just try to relate to them like a message, like, hey, you know that doctor, like, we love him, he's awesome. Yeah, they you know, they have a nice house up there, super nice cars, whatever. But I promise you, like, back when he was in my position, he went through the exact same thing. And just like relating a little story, like, so, you know, could kind of change the way that they think about it, because it puts a face to the challenge, and puts a face and it personalizes this challenge that we're going to go through to somebody that they may already look up to. You know, for many Polynesians, and that might be of the LDS faith. I mean, I've also talked about President Nelson, who is the president of that church, and who also had to go through the struggles of medical school. And so I think it's just interesting to be able to try and relate it that way to people who may struggle to understand the challenges of med school and the debt that you may accumulate.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. My in-laws are both. My father-in-law just finished his master's degree. So I'm always in talking with them. They've been super supportive. I think the big thing that I get, and I'm sure Siale gets too, is, well, when are you going to have your babies? Is like the big thing, because you're talking about this like commitment, 4 years and 3 years, and they're like, oh, and then like you're gonna have your babies now, or are you gonna wait, or what? And so I think that's probably been another aspect. Like being a woman, it's like, okay, when are you gonna be pregnant? Like, I want my grandkids. So I guess like Siale and Luti put it perfectly. I think just I don't think there's an easy way to help others understand in some circumstances, and so the best thing that we can do is be that example for them. And so just grateful for others who have had their education to kind of band together and tell that story.
So we've kind of talked about a lot of like the difficulties of well, some parts of it, but what would you say is your motivation in terms of like being able to push through a lot of these things? Was there a moment when you're like, I just want to be a doctor? So like that just made me, Luti kind of alluded to it. There have been people in the community that he saw were representative for him. Or is there a specific moment? Like for instance, me, a lot of the reason why I continued on in education was my grandfather and grandmother, and a lot of the sacrifices that they made to be here. But I'd love to hear your own personal stories of like focusing on those things to push you through. Like, I'm sure you all are pulling all-nighters all the time and probably going to study right after we get off this call. And it can't just be, I'm going to be rich one day. It has to be something deeper. So what are those things that motivate you all? We start with Luti.
You know, I think there's a lot of things, but if I had to take it back to like maybe the first time I ever kind of thought about it. My dad, when I was young, probably like, I want to say 3, but I don't know if I remember stuff when I'm 3, but it was either 3 or 4. I just remember my dad asked me one day, he's like, Luti, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, Dad, I want a yate for the rest of my life, just like you. I was like, oh man, he was laughing because he's, you know, it came out funny. At the time, you know, that's what I thought I wanted to do. I want to be like my dad. I wanted to go to yate and, you know, pour sima or whatever. But then he kind of got serious. He got quiet and he told me, like, Luti, you can be anything you want. He continued on to tell me, you know, the reason why him and my mom moved here from Tongan was to let us grow up with more opportunities than they ever had out there. So he told me, like, you can do whatever you want. You can become a doctor, you can become an astronaut, you can become a scientist, a lawyer, a pilot, whatever it is you want to do, we'll support you, and we know, and I just know that you can do it. And so I think just from that early age, you know, just being a little kid and just having that thought so young that, oh man, my dad thinks I can do that. He thinks I can do all these things. It just kind of implemented in me. There's a belief that I could get to that point, that I could become a doctor. And I think that it just kind of grew from there. But behind all that too, I think what drove that to grow was just knowing that people in my Polynesian community don't have that same belief sometimes. You know, there's not a lot of Polys who maybe had that belief like I did from such a young age. So sometimes maybe I think our people limit themselves maybe and limit their potential when they really do have the potential to be greater than anyone I know as well. I think so that kind of kept me going and kept me growing, and throughout undergrad, you know, and being surrounded by a bunch of good friends, good Polynesians who inspired me and helped me get to where I am now. I just really hope that by doing this as well, I can help my Polynesian community and those who follow after, that they can have that same belief as well, growing up and knowing that they could be whatever they want: doctors, business owners, lawyers, pilots, whatsoever.
I can go next. So I feel like for me, it was like a bunch of little seeds. Like there was never that one huge moment where it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a doctor. I was a lifeguard. That was like my summer job when I was in high school. So I think like learning how to do CPR and things like that, I thought that was super cool. I think I didn't really start thinking about actually pursuing medicine. I actually went to college wanting to be a personal trainer because I thought that would be really cool. And so I guess like throughout my time, I was in exercise science. I was going to do that. I served in LDS mission in Hawaii, and I remember there was one area, and it was in Waimea on Big Island, where they only have one hospital in that area. And I mean, on that whole half of the island really. And I remember some folks that we would go visit, like they had like this one uncle had like really bad gout, and it was so bad that he couldn't get out of his chair. And like we were talking with how we could connect them with resources, and just like kind of seeing how little resources there really were for him and for his family. So I think that like got me start thinking like, oh, like there's a lot of issues in our system. And then that like extended further as I got more and more exposure to healthcare. And then I think really when I wanted to start pursuing it is I got a job with Intermountain as a scribe. And so I got to kind of see the other side of it. And I don't know. So just like little culminations here and there. But I think, I mean, as Luti said, like, I know, although I'm not Polynesian myself, like I see all of the shortcomings in our healthcare systems for the Polynesian people who I love. And I mean, Siale and Luti are just great examples of the change that we need to see in medicine, and there needs to be more. So I would say, along with Luti, like moving along, we need to open the door so that our physicians can look more like the communities that they serve in. because it's not fair that people have to grow up in a world where they don't see people as pilots, as physicians, as lawyers who look like them, especially when so many communities, I don't know, there's just so much talent. And so I think, if anything, if I could help open that door in any way possible, that's kind of also my desire. So.
Yeah, since I was young, like my dad has like instilled into me, like, you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be a doctor. And I guess it's just something I always thought, like, that's what I want to do. My mother is a nurse, and so I was exposed to like healthcare from a young age. My mother is a home health nurse, and so like on Saturdays, or like after she'd pick me up from school or dance, like I'd go with her and we'd visit like some of her patients who their spouses have passed away or whatever. And so like I've been exposed to healthcare from a young age. And like, sorry, I'm like gonna go all over the place, but like I went into like undergrad thinking like I want to do like medical school, but like these two can share like prerequisites at BYU for medical school are just like really competitive. People are kind of mean. And it's like when you don't feel like you have people like when you don't feel like you know doctors, like you don't have the in, and so it's just like hard to be like accepted by this like group of people who like know how it works and stuff. And so, and then like the general classes, like general chemistry, that was like one of the first classes I took at BYU, and it was so hard for me. Like I had never struggled so much like in school, and like I was like not the top of my class at all at like BYU and stuff. And so like even though I went into it, like I did school for 2 years, and then I also served an LDS mission. And like at the end of like when I was preparing to go on my mission, like one of the reasons I chose to go is because I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, because medical school just feels like so far, like that seems so like unattainable right now because of like how hard these classes are. And so I'm gonna like go on a mission to like try to figure out my life and stuff. And I served a mission in the Philippines, and so like I kind of was like thinking about like, well, I could do other things. Like in high school I was really good at math, so maybe like I should consider engineering, or like I don't know, something else, maybe accounting, something with numbers, because like maybe that'd be better. But had like a few like medical experiences. Like I got dengue, and then like I saw like all sorts of like random sicknesses like I hadn't seen like here in America. And like they just had no healthcare, like they were so poor, like there was no shot of them getting any sort of help for some of these things. And it just kind of hit me like, oh my gosh, like this is so crazy, this is like so sad, like they're never going to be able to have healthcare. And then I was like, wait, this happened, like then I like started to reflect back, like, oh my gosh, this happened to my grandma, this happened to my grandpa, this happened to my auntie when she had cancer. And then I was like going through, I was like, wait, this is happening at home. And it would just be so crazy if I went home and like didn't at least try and stuff. And so that was kind of when I was like, okay, I think like this is what I want to do, and like I'm going to put it in God's hands, and it'll work out if it's supposed to work out. And then like I came home and a lot of things worked out. And I think I think God plays like a big role in our lives and like helping us play certain roles and stuff. So yeah, I cry a lot. You'll see that. Like I'll probably randomly cry throughout this meeting, but yeah. But yeah, serving a mission, and then like thinking of my community members, like that's a big motivation for when things get hard, because like it's hard and it sucks sometimes, but when you remember your grandma or your grandpa, you're like, oh, it's gonna be worth it, and I can do this and stuff. And so it just makes like, even at med school, like when I have moments that I'm like, oh shoot, like I don't know if I'm gonna pass this test or whatever. I remember like the people in the Philippines. I remember my grandpa or my auntie and stuff. And so those are the things that like I'm sure Luti and Talisha relate to. Those are the things that like keep pushing you forward when it's like it sucks and it's hard.
Thank you, Siale. Some of the things that you all touched upon that I think are also awesome looking forward. I can relate to all of that as well with what you're talking about with it being difficult and then trying to dig really deep to keep pushing forward. But the other pieces that I think would be interesting to hear from you all is what do you see as the disparities in medicine, and what are the things that you all want to address when you do finally have that opportunity? Siale, you talked a little bit about it. And is there a certain field that you feel like you can make the greatest impact from your perspective as a Pasifika woman, and the experiences that you have had with serving an LDS mission and working in the community? How would you all approach medicine in that different way because of those experiences?
I guess we'll just reverse it. I mean, like the disparities, we all know it, like we all have family, or our family, like we don't have insurance, or we've all, yeah, like, or we choose, I think a lot of it, like in our community, it comes from like we don't understand, like sometimes it's kind of scary. Like I had an auntie who had cancer and she chose, you know, to not like do like fota and stuff, but like didn't want to do chemo, and westernized medicine can just be like really scary. And so I think some of the disparities come because like we as a community are maybe a little scared because we don't understand, or there's mistrust in the system, and the mistrust can come from like just the way that we're treated or whatever. But there's a lot of disparities, like we see it with COVID-19, where like the highest like affected population in Utah, and I think even in the US, like we're disproportionately affected compared to a lot of other community members. So for me personally, like I think you can make a difference in all aspects of healthcare and whatever you do. I want to go into primary care just because I feel like we could be better at being like proactive in our community, preventing things like before it gets to that point. And I think like most Polynesians don't have like a primary care provider, or because they don't have insurance or whatever. So like their only interaction with healthcare is like going to the ER or like going to the hospital when things are already so bad. But if we can like prevent that, then that could help decrease a lot of the disparities that we see and we experience.
Talisha.
Yeah, I feel like Siale put it very well. I think working in healthcare, I think that's when my eyes started really opening to see how, you know, Pacific Islanders, how Latinx community, just like minorities in general, are treated in medicine. And it was actually quite aggravating at times. So I worked in OBGYN, and that's actually what I'm interested in right now currently. And I think like I specifically remember this Tongan patient coming in, and the OB was just trying to tell her she needs to get on birth control because she's having too many kids and her uterus is going to implode, and like saying it in such like a culturally desensitive way, and just talking down to her and just being there in the corner. I'm like his scribe, and I'm like in the corner, like typing furiously, like, bro, you need to like take a chill pill and like figure this out and talk to her like she's a human being. So I think like having experiences like that, or I've seen doctors harp on Pacific Islanders weights, you know, like, and I've seen families. I worked in pediatrics. I saw whole families coming in, and just the comments that the nursing staff would make like behind those, you know, children's and families' backs. And it's just like, there's just not, people need to be, like Siale was saying, there's a distrust because you can tell when somebody is talking down to you. like you can tell when somebody looks at you and they might have a smile on, but they have disgust in their eyes. And so I feel like, again, I don't know, like I'm interested more in OBGYN. I think women's health is something, like particularly in the Polynesian community, that there's a lot of disparities, like even just with like sex education in general. There's that intersectionality of just a whole lot of factors. But I think when it comes down to it, it's like people need to be trusted, people need to go to someone who they can trust and who they can, because when you're a physician, you're asking your patient to tell you the most intimate, like personal things about yourself. And if you talk to them like they aren't even human, or you judge them for the way that they are living their life or their cultural practices, then like, what's the point? So, I mean, I've had aunties too, like who, they only go to the hospital when there's a heart attack or when, dialysis, things like that, because it's like, oh, what's primary care? They don't have that relationship because they don't want to go, they don't understand, and no one's willing to sit down with them and help them through it.
All really good points. Well, I didn't learn about primary care until a long time. I should have known about primary care as a child. But even that differentiation, I think, is so important, what you all are talking about. And someone who's a mother myself, and having that, just like the difference between my experiences where I like chose to have midwives instead of an OB because I went and shopped around and had that experience, just shows like I have a job that allows me to have insurance, private insurance, and then that insurance can cover multiple doctors. And when I go in, I can navigate for myself. So yeah, all those things will be helpful. How about you, Luti? What is in the future, what are you looking towards?
I definitely want to definitely like take into account, like try to do all these things that Siale and Talisha are doing, especially like in medicine in general. I think it's so important that we as Polynesians can bring that strength of ours. That I feel like if there's anything Polynesians, like the best thing that we're probably our best talent, you could say, is just loving people, is loving, caring, being genuine about people, and that's just on top of a bunch of good strengths and an endless list of strengths that our people have. So I just want to implement that into my practice, into everything that I do in the future as I go through medicine. But I did want to mention, I think my ultimate goals are a little different. I don't really necessarily think, whatever I choose to do, I think it'll be good enough for our people to see like, hey, Luti did it in this, we can do it too. Like my choice right now, I want to get into orthopedic surgery. That's been kind of like one of the main choices I've been wanting to do. Hopefully I can help Polynesians in that as well. But I probably won't be as hands-on with Siale and Talisha with Polynesians in my office, in my direct practice. Hopefully I can be. Hopefully I can in whatever ways I can be. But I hope to just take that knowledge and to just take that ability to be take that fact that being a doctor, and I just want to take that into the community. My dreams down the road are just to surround myself by the youth, surround, let them into my home, like let them just be around my family, just give them opportunities to see like, hey, Luti, this normal dude, if he can get there, like I want them to see from such a young age that if I can get there, they can too. And I think like that's something that I was blessed with, which is like little by little, just experiences of just seeing it from when I was young, or just having that belief when I was young. I hope that as these youth can just like, get that experience, and they can start to have that dream as well, that they can start to get to that point where they want to get into medicine because they know they can as well. And that's my dream down the road for our people. I hope to help, just get more people into medicine as we recruit more and get more Polynesians who realize that they are healers too. I think it'll be awesome to see the medical field change as that poly love, just infects the the medical field, and people will see a difference. And I think that's a really long-term goal, but that's one of my goals, hopefully, is to just help our youth.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part too, since like both systemically and institutionally, medicine is a bit cold and separated and objective. Saying you love your patient would be a huge paradigm shift for that to even occur. So I think that is an amazing goal. And coming from that perspective of Pacific Islanders, like that's just, you do authentically care about people, and so that's why you went into this. Before I go into questions, I just want to have one more question for you all, and then remind the attendees, if they have questions, to drop them now, and we'll start answering them. But one of the final questions I wanted to ask you in this portion was, these are your motivations, this is your background, but wanting to shift into some of like the technical side of it, and shift to the Mcat question, because Siale talked about how like difficult the classes were too, and which I just realized something. We all are BYU alum. I went to BYU too, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hardly ever see people give me crap about it every job I've had in Salt Lake, that I went to BYU and then I work at the U. So also welcome, and I'm so happy that you are here at the U. But the question of like the competitiveness in terms of the science courses, and then what were you able to do in terms of taking the Mcat? What was preparatory and like, or most stressful? Can you just describe a little bit about that experience? And then we'll head into questions from some of the students and attendees. We'll start with Luti.
I don't know what, the Mcat's hard. That's the easiest way I can put it. The Mcat's hard.
Yes, don't sugarcoat it. Yeah.
This. I think they reduced the time for a little bit. I think it's back to the standard time that was before now, though. But it's almost an 8-hour test. It's an all-day thing. You're going hard, and you're using your brain every single minute of that test. You get a couple of breaks in between, but it is a tough test. If I had to give advice for it, if I could go back and change anything that I did and suggest to anyone to in how they study for it, is just to be consistent. The first time I took a practice MCAT test, I think I got 2 hours into it and then I knocked out. So my first MCAT score was like hella low. But it's just little by little consistency, just like making sure every single day that you're working your brain. Your brain's a muscle. It's just like any other muscle you have. You don't put it to use, and it won't be able to last 8 hours. I'll tell you that. But just like any other muscle, just like any other thing you do, it requires hard work. For those of you who are listening who might have been previous athletes, if you want to be a good football player, if you wanted to be a good volleyball player, whatever, you had to go to practice every single day. You had to put in time. You had to sweat, and you had to condition. And no matter what, you had to suffer all those, whatever coach put you through. In that same sense, the MCAT's the same thing. You gotta put in time. It's really rigorous, but just think about it, just in the long run, it is worth it. Those are things that'll lead you to have a better opportunity later down the road. And it'll make you better people in the end, but it will be hard. And just know, if I can do it, I honestly believe every single one of you can do it too.
I can go. So Siale was mentioning how BYU, there's like the chemistry class that she took, and it was like super hard. So I actually failed that class. I got a straight F in that class, or like a D- or something. And so like, just from like my freshman year, I really struggled in the sciences, actually to the point where I graduated And then looking into applying for medical schools, my minimum science GPA wasn't good enough. And so I actually had to do a do-it-myself post-bac program. So through BYU self-study, I had to take, I think it was 4 classes to get my GPA up to the minimum that the U would accept, which was a 3.0. So that's kind of my like academic situation. So going into the Mcat, I was very nervous, and I actually rescheduled it several times because I have just always struggled in the sciences. So that was like, I would say that was my biggest wall to get over. But like Luti said, like, I think undergrad, it was so busy. I was working full time. I was taking classes. I was doing sports. So like I had no time to study. So I actually, I did those like after I had graduated. I took 2 gap years to do this, but I graduated and then I did my classes and then I just did the Mcat. I was still working full time, but I just did the Mcat. Like there was nothing else going on in my life, and it was awful because I do not love studying some of like physics and things that we had to study for that. RIP. But yeah, it's rough. It took a lot of sacrifices, but I think just like sticking with it. And like Luti, the first test I took, I think I got like a 480 something. The average I think now is what, like 507, 506, something like that. So I had to work for over a year in order to take it. And once I took it, I didn't do that great. So I was really nervous going into it. And lucky enough, how the U does their applications is a little bit different with the GPA and Mcat. And I feel like that was in my favor. But just knowing that, again, like if I can do it, all of you can do it, because it is rough. It is definitely rough.
Yeah, the MCAT really sucks. And I think it's probably like the worst part of the whole like medical school road. But just like I was really lucky. I actually was like a part of a program. It's called the Mcat Scholars Program that the University of Utah School of Medicine puts on through their Inclusion and Outreach department. So it's in the summer, and they actually provide you a stipend, so you don't have to like work during that time. So to help you pay for rent and food, and then they pay for you to take a Kaplan prep course. And this is for students who are underrepresented. So actually like a lot of Pacific Islanders that I know of that are currently in medical school and from Utah, they actually did this program. So if you are getting close to applying and taking the Mcat and you're from Utah, or maybe even if you're outside of Utah now, you can apply for that program. And that was like a huge blessing to like me and my husband, that like I didn't need to work during that time. Like it's not a ton of money, but it's like enough to help, and that I could like focus during that time. So I was like Talisha, I like kept rescheduling my Mcat. So ideally, like what they tell you is you should take the Mcat in like early spring, like March, April, or May, because medical school applications open up on June 1st, I think, if I'm thinking about this right. So they want you to have like taken the Mcat before you apply, so your score's already ready. But like I mentioned, I was doing track, and our track season, you have an indoor season January through March, and then March through May, you have an outdoor season. And so just like was not feasible for me to take it then. So I actually took the Mcat, or I graduated in the summer, like August, and then I took the Mcat at the end of that month. So I took like a class or two in the summer, and I studied for the Mcat while doing the summer scholars program, like while preparing to take the Mcat. And I didn't do that great, to be honest. Like, and if I could go back though, like, cause I've had to like retrain my mind on how to study. Cause I kind of like these two, like, I just didn't have a lot of time in undergrad doing like track and research and stuff, that I didn't know how to study. And it hasn't been really until medical school that like I've realized like how standardized testing works. So for those of you that are like preparing to take the Mcat or any sort of graduate school test, I would say do as many practice questions as you can. So like a lot of us spend time, like we waste it on content review, but the best thing to do is like do a practice question and then like you'll probably get it wrong, but then that like teaches you like, okay, I don't know that. And that's like a lot more effective than just like, I think I'm going to review this and I think I'm going to review that. Like if you use practice questions to like help guide you and like keep doing practice questions, like everyone who I know who scored really well in the MCAT, like they'll say the same thing. Or like even like board exams and stuff, like practice questions are like the key in standardized testing. So expose yourself to like as many practice questions as possible. You don't even have to do a prep course. You can buy like question banks. And I think like that's like a big key in like succeeding in the MCAT or just like standardized testing in general, because I hate it, but that's just how academia is.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice with the students in terms of like just tests in general. Usually it's not testing all on your knowledge, but like how good you are at taking a GRE or how good you are at taking an MCAT. So that's great advice. The other is talking about is like actually going through and seeing how the pattern of the test or the questions, not necessarily like, do you know all the breadth and depth of biology and biochem and things. Similarly to all of the other tests, which I am terrible at just math in general. And I don't know how I got into graduate school sometimes, because I'm like, they were probably like, does she know 1 plus 1? But I could read and did a great job on that side. So like, even if you are struggling with some of the things, to the students that are watching and those that are prepping to go to grad school and medical school, there are ways in order to like beef up certain parts of your resume. I mean, you still have to have certain grades and scores, but to show your journey. So one of the questions which leads straight into this from our students is, hi all, I'm currently an undergrad pre-med student and I am really concerned about how to make myself stand out. What advice do you have, and or what did you do to separate yourself from the thousands of other applications in your cycle? So that was one of the questions.
I think like just your identity, that alone is like enough. There's no like one specific med student. Like medical students don't have to look one way. They don't come in like a certain shape. And so I think just finding like what you're passionate about, like that's what sticks out. Like you can write all these things, you can say and do all these things like to make it look good. But at the end of the day, like any graduate school program, like people are smart and they can tell when you're lying and when you're telling the truth. And so whatever you decide to do with like extracurriculars or whatever, like make sure you're like sincere and it's something you actually like, because this is what you will write about in your application. This is what you'll talk about in interviews. And like, that's what makes you you. Like that alone is like enough to make you stand out. And you don't need to do like anything crazy even like, and like something that like I see sometimes like in applications that I review is like people will write this thing about like how they want to help like their community, but then like their like extracurriculars, like you never see them doing community work. So then you're like, wait, like I thought you want to help your community. So like kind of finding a theme and like letting that like guide your journey. Like if you want to help women, if you're interested in women's health, then like volunteer at like the women's shelter or whatever. Like having a theme will be like how you can pull your application all together. And like, that's what admissions committees will see. And like, they can tell when you're sincere through it's not just like an essay, it's through like all the little things that you're doing. And it doesn't have to be big, like going on a service trip to Guatemala for 2 weeks. It can just be like, I just helped my neighbor, you know, like those are the things that stand out for admissions committees and stuff.
Just to hop on what Siale was saying, I think one of the most helpful thing I heard from a pre-med advisor, kind of mentor friend of mine, I just asked him like, hey, you know, I do feel like I'm different than a lot of applicants as a Polynesian. Like, well, how would you put this down on paper? And he said, just be genuine. I think there's a lot of things that comes in our experiences as Polynesians that a lot of people don't experience. You know, I feel growing up in a Polynesian community, or you're raised around very service-oriented people, doing service regularly for a lot of different reasons. You know, sometimes it just comes off as you doing pu'is for your mom or whatever, but those little things are the things that people love to see. And if you can just take a minute to just realize like who you are, why you are that way, the unique experiences that you've had, like Siale was saying, I think those things will be able to set you apart. Like Siale was saying, like a lot of people talk about helping the community. That was like one of my biggest things that I talked about in my personal statement. And you know, a bunch of the volunteer experiences that I gave were things like just helping out the young men in my church ward, and just how much that meant to me. Being able to talk to them every single week, twice a week, and just being able to just talk to them about their dreams, about what they can do. So like just simple things that, as you internalize like just the things that make you unique as a person and the involvement that you have with people around you, I think there's a lot of cool things that being a Polynesian, you know, those experiences that you have, I think there's a lot that makes you stand out more than you probably think. And that's where I was, you know, a year ago, as I was applying. I just realized, you know, there's a lot to me that has been taught to me by my village and by my community that I give myself credit for, or that I give them self credit for. But if you think about it, I think there's a lot of cool activities that you can write about. And if you don't have them, then just go out and find them. Find things that make you happy and that make others happy, because those schools will love to just invite anybody to go to their school if they know that person loves to help, if that person loves to be of service. And you know, it's not a hard thing for this person to give their hearts. And I think that's just an easy thing for a lot of polys to get to that point, to just give themselves.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Siale and Luti have said. I hate how toxic the pre-med culture is. Like just everywhere. I know BYU was a whole other world, but you look to your right and you look to your left, and somebody is starting a nonprofit organization in South Africa, and another person whose dad is an orthopedic surgeon has like gone around and shadowed like a world-renowned orthopedic surgeon. And then you look back at yourself and you're like, yeah, what can I give? I need to stand out. But I think that's like just what Luti and Siale, just echoing them, like it really comes down to your genuine person and who you are. The first thing when I got my call to be accepted to the U, the first thing that they said was like, your application was written very well. Like that was the first thing they said. They didn't say, oh, that's so cool that you got, you know, these clinical hours or your Mcat score. Like the first thing they said is your application was really well written. And so I think mastering, like Siale and then Luti had mentioned, like mastering that theme, like community service, or maybe it's, you know, research, like really research based. And so you did a bunch of research and presented your research in all of these different areas. So I think as long as you go where your passion leads you, like it won't lead you astray. Don't ever feel like you have to check boxes, because if somebody is telling you that you have to check boxes, they're not telling the truth. I think that checkbox mentality is one of the most toxic things in pre-med culture. So again, quality over quantity, and be true to.
Thank you. That's awesome advice, even not just for medical school, but all school in general. The next question we have here is, it's from T. You all know T Kini, and he said, he said, "Maloha pito to each of you for your resilience, grit, and passion in your academic journey. We love and support you all. Will you please share with us how you practice self-care?" And then he said, "Let's get together sooner than later." I don't know what that means. I'm just reading Dino knows what that means. But what are some practices that you all have for self-care? Since, you're talking about like the toxic nature of like pre-med, but I think like in all competitive graduate programs, which the university, to let everybody know, the University of Utah's medical school is highly competitive. And that's why I think these three are awesome too, that they were able to get in there. But like a lot of my friends who are Palangi and also just people of color know that it's also competitive. So what do you do in order to keep that self-care mentality going.
I'll share one thing. When I was on at BYU, one of the most interesting things I learned was during my time with the BYU Polynesian psychology team. So we did research just about like the differences in what helps Polynesians heal psychologically in comparison to, you know, Western psychology therapy. And one of the interesting things that I found was that Polynesians, you know, you see in movies with psychologists or different therapists, and the guy that's sitting on the couch, he doesn't say anything, or he'll just talk stories, and the psychologist will just write down and then say, okay, here's your prescription, this is what you're suffering, there you go. However, with Polynesians, the thing that helps us heal is an interaction, like connecting with people. And so I just thought it was kind of interesting, and I kind of just took that to heart, that us as Polynesians, a big thing that has changed, that heals us and just keeps us going and makes us, you know, feel okay, is a connection with our people. Sometimes it's connection with our land, connection with our God, but that connection and that community is something that will help us all have a really strong feeling of self-care. If there's advice that I could give to anyone for self-care, I would just say that, you know, just find your community, find the people that you can connect with, and just surround yourself with good people that'll help you and lift you and elevate you into so that you can be the best person you are. We are a very tight-knit people, I think closer than we realize sometimes, and I think that's an important part of it.
I think self-care is just like a continual process, because in medical school, it's so easy to make that the last on your priority list because you have this never-ending to-do list, but that is life. So I feel like for me, like I really struggled after undergrad because I was involved in rugby, and that like kicked my butt into gear, and I was working out so much. And after I graduated, that just like totally plummeted, and I didn't take the time to exercise. And so I think like it's really difficult now, but even just like taking 30 minutes to like go on a walk outside, or to, you know, go on the bike, or whatever you can do, like that's what I've kind of relied on, especially in these really hard weeks, to try to just get my heart rate up, and that seemed to help a lot.
I am really bad with self-care. My husband will tell you that. He'll tell me, you're going 200 miles per hour and you're in a 10-mile-per-hour speed limit zone. You need to chill out. So I'm really bad with this sometimes, because I think sometimes it's always like, have I done enough and stuff? And I think that just comes like from our community and stuff. But I've been trying to be, it's like hard with COVID. So before, like when we had in-person with school, like my hope was kind of like, it's like a job 8 to 5. Like when I go to school, like I'm at school and I'm studying and I'm doing it. And then when I go home, it's time to be home. It's time to be present with my husband and with my family members. And so COVID has like made that a lot harder. And so, yeah, just like making sure that I'm like taking time to exercise or get a little workout in, even if it's like a half hour. This year, my husband and I picked up skiing, which we're like the only brown people you'll see on the entire mountain, and we're just falling down the mountain because we're not good at skiing. But it's been like really good for like my mental health and stuff to like get outside, get in the sun and stuff. And so like I just have to be really conscious about like taking the time for myself, whether it's skiing or reading a book or exercising. It's kind of pathetic, but sometimes you have to like plan it, especially like when you're in medical school, or any graduate program, I'm sure you have to like tell yourself, like, I need to take care of myself. Like, I can't do what I need to do academically if I don't do this thing to take care of myself. So something I think like I'm definitely working on.
Just something to connect with that real quick before we do. It's from Dr. Lani Taholo. If you don't know, she's a therapist in our community, and she said, "Thank you for your wonderful for the wonderful panelists. We appreciate you all. Are any of you connected to the Pacific Islanders psychologists? To any Pacific Islander psychologists? Please share if yes. Also, after sharing our polylove, what would you consider being effective ways to help to advance prevention and to develop earlier and consistent physician-patient relationships in our families to help stave off deathbed hospital visits among our people?" So if anybody wants to jump in on that.
I don't know if this is like necessarily answering your question. The only Tongan psychologist that like I have a relationship with is Alpha Kanuch down at BYU. She works in like the BYU Student Health Center. We were like in a ward together. So she's the only one that I feel like I have any sort of connection to. And then as far as like being preventative and like our community members like going to the hospital, I think like the big thing is like getting a primary care like provider for them. You can't like so many times like we wait until it's a heart attack or until it's like we really don't feel well because we don't want to pay a bill, but then we end up like going to the emergency room and our bill's a lot more expensive than if we would have had gone to like our family doctor. And sometimes like we don't even know like how it works or like how to set that up. But if we could, I think if you are like a child, an adult child, or like even if you're a teenager, like you need to like pressure your parents, like you need to go to the doctor once a year. Even if you feel okay, like it's just important for you to go so that like we can prevent things before it's too late or till something bad happens. And so like if you're like a younger generation, like push your mom or push your dad or push your auntie or uncle or whoever, or if you notice like something is wrong. I know it's like kind of scary and like against our cult, like kind of like we don't talk to our older ones like that, but if you do it out of love, like mom, I'm really concerned about you. I think you need to like go to the doctor, or like mom, I want to make sure you're here for my kids when we're older. I want you to be around for a long time. So I think it's important that we go in and we make sure everything's okay. So if you can like encourage your family members or even you yourself, like I know it's hard to like go to the doctor, but like if you can go once a year, that's better than like spending a week or a month in like the ER and stuff. So.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add in on that? I can ask for a next question. Oh, Luti.
Dr. Tahola, I was just going to say, I do know Polynesian psychologists, but they're mostly down at BYU, like Dr. Hoku Conklin, Dr. Bango Gansinia, and Kavika Allen. But I think it'd be good to connect because I'm sure that, you know, they might know a few more people. So just don't be afraid to reach out. I'm sure we could find some people here, hopefully.
Also, Talisha, did you want to say anything towards that question?
I could just add to the second part, how Siale was saying, like getting into primary care. I think another important thing, and this of course is like down the line, but if you look at Utah's population, Pacific Islanders make up like 1.6% of the population. And you look at the medical students, and out of 500, there are 3 Pacific Islanders, which is like 0.0006%. And so until we can get more Polynesians as healthcare providers, I think that's just the end goal. I think like if you look at a goal for 30 years down the road, like folks will go to a provider if they know that they'll receive culturally sensitive care. And so that's where it's like Polynesians are so needed in medicine. And so if that's something I can, end off on.
And connecting with this, our final question from the students is, with the coronavirus in your opinion, from the medical side, what are some of the major changes you think we need to make as a society? I know this is a meta question, but I feel like we need to think of long-term strategy and change, especially now with all of the variants. So anybody jump in on that?
I could go first. I think a big change, like from the community side, is communication. Again, there's a huge gap between the community and the healthcare providers. And there's a lot of things that go into that, but I think specifically like in the Pacific Islander population, like just being able to get and facilitate good information, because a lot of folks get their information you know, on Facebook or through the grapevine. And so I think being able to get good information so people know, not just like, hey, wear a mask, or like, hey, get vaccinated, but why? Or like, you know, what will the vaccine do? Like, what is in the vaccine? Getting that sort of really critical information out to communities so that they can make informed decisions, I think is like one of the most important things that the healthcare community needs to pivot so that they can reach all communities and not just those with a certain understandings.
Siale or Luti, any thoughts on that?
I think coronavirus just like amplified a lot of the problems we already had in healthcare, like problems with like accessibility, and just this is like a really like complex question, just because there's so many factors that have played into like why we have been so hard hit. And but I think a lot of it comes down to like accessibility to healthcare, or even if it's not like healthcare, but to like good information, like Talisha said, that like is such a key in, yeah, like changing everything and stuff. But and two, like I wish people could just be treated like regardless of like health insurance status or whatever. Like I think those are some things like we need to change as a society. We like sadly we probably won't, but like with that said though, like when we like our, like I think it's really important that we're like aware like civilly like what's going on, like who we are electing. Like I think we have to be aware, like when we vote people into office, like what are they going to do for like me and my community? Are they going to provide accessibility to me? Are they going to provide resources that help me and my community? And so like just being involved and not just taking things for like face value from Facebook, like because so-and-so shared something that this person did. Like I know it's really hard for us to like do the research, but I think that's like such an important part, like that has been like really exposed during COVID, when we are like, we need to be like actively involved and engaged with who we're like electing into office, or like what's going on in our community. So when a problem hits, we know that like we're taken care of and like our community is taken care of and stuff. And so anyways, that's like a really complex question.
Luti, you have anything to add?
I think these two girls said it all.
I think yeah, that is a hard question in terms of like, it's, if you want to get into politics or institutionalized racism, and if we're talking about poverty and all of those different parts that also are surfacing because there's this global pandemic. But I do appreciate what you all have been talking about in terms of like representation is not just the end goal, but then it's because whatever experiences you bring there is what is going to change these different systems. And then that's where not just our value comes in for, but why we're so needed in those spaces. Like if you're, and then understanding and being critical enough to be like, okay, what are these different what does this actually mean, and how do I participate in these different systems? So I applaud all of you for doing that hard work in the medical field. And since you all are 0.000 whatever, it's a heavy load to lift. I wanted to just ask if all of you could just drop your information into the chat box, so that if any of you all were interested in contacting all three of these folks, even as busy as they just said, if you're interested in applying to school in the University of Utah, they've offered to connect still. So there's a few students that I do know that are interested in medical school. So ambassadors, if you are watching now, these are the three that you can start with. One of the final questions that I was thinking of as you all were talking is, where or how would you like the impact of Pacific Islanders in medicine to go? So like you as a collective and not just as an individual in terms of medicine. I think Luti alluded to this before when he talked about like how instead of always looking at it from a deficit lens, so I'll just give you a little bit of background, where a lot of the students are asking similar questions, like how do I stand out? And like, I need to be like somebody that can contribute, but coming from a perspective, an asset-based perspective, where it's like, okay, what do we bring and how do we change systems on this larger scale as Pacific Islanders, or those that are doing work with Pacific Islanders?
I guess I'll just restate what I said before. I think until physicians, particularly in medicine, but I think this applies to any health or any career path, until those who are serving communities look and reflect the community themselves, I think there is always going to be that like implicit bias. And so I think that's why it's so important for Pacific Islanders to be in, I mean, not just as physicians, lawyers, in politics, because if you have a politician representing their community and they know that community firsthand, like that is going to be the most effective advocacy. And so that's why it's just Polynesians are needed. And so no matter what your background is, like your voices are needed in medicine and in all career paths.
And maybe just on top of that, I think one of the end goals that would be nice to see as well would just be like a dissolvement of, you know, that barrier between Polynesian patients and their doctors. You know, hopefully it can get to that point where not even just Polynesians, but like just many people who maybe don't feel represented in the doctors that they see. It'd be nice when they get to that point when they know that they can go to a doctor and they can feel cared about, they can feel treated for, and they can feel that that person really does have the best interest in mind. And, you know, I think that just comes little by little, just changing the culture in medicine. like Talisha said, changing the representation of the people in medicine. And it'll take, you know, it's a long-term goal, but I think when we get to that point when Polynesians will feel safe in trusting medical doctors and seeing that, you know, they can go into doctors for certain visits and see them for certain things, it'll be a good change. And I think that's probably the end goal, to just help our people in the long run just live better quality lives.
Yeah, they already like summarized most of it. But yeah, I just want to see more of us like at the table making decisions that like impact like our communities and stuff, like, and to be advocates, like even if you're not a doctor, but just like having enough confidence like to be an advocate for yourself when you are in the room with a doctor is like, that's, I would love to see like more Polynesians like asking questions or just like like I said, like inserting themselves, like making a space for them at the table, so that they can make sure they and their families are cared for and like are advocated for.
Well, thank you all three of you for participating today and just sharing your knowledge and the opportunity to meet you all, and even your time with whoever our future students will be reaching out to you. I think I just want to, on behalf of the Pacific Island Studies Initiative and on behalf of myself, thank you three for blazing trails up there at the medical school. As someone who is a first gen professional too, who, like we talked about in the beginning, that trail is often lonely, and being 0.0001% of a space is difficult. But I just want to let you all know that we're with you as well, that our community is with us. And even when we see you all in this frame, we're like, are we in medical school too? Are we there too? And that we appreciate that. And when that time is difficult and hard, and I know you all can go study after this, we thank you for taking us along with you all. Thank you so much. And thank you for even sharing this space on this Friday night when you all could have been on a date or doing something else. So from all of us here, thank you so much. And those that are out in the attendees, hope to connect more, and we thank you. So everybody have a good Friday evening. Thank you so much.
Fapatai Lava to all our contributors, specifically our Bridge team, School of Transform, Education, Culture, and Society, and Dr. Kehelani Vaughn. Remember to join us every other Friday evening as we Talanoa with Pasifika scholars, staff, and community leaders. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us at U of U Pasifika Scholars and the Pasifika Archive. Till next time, Malalava lesoifua maua.